I found men's protection in my wife's bag. I put a pepper spray inside. Cheating. Revenge story. I found them on a Tuesday morning, the kind of mundane weekday where nothing dramatic ever happens until it does. I was getting ready for work, folding a t-shirt the way I always do, when my hand brushed against her handbag, the one she left on the chair by the door. It slid open and there it was, a small foil pack, the kind you don't expect to see if you're still pretending to sleep through the small betrayals of a marriage. My heart tried to keep its rhythm steady. I turned the pack over in my hands, ridiculous hope surfacing that maybe it belonged to someone else, maybe she'd picked it up by mistake, maybe I was imagining things. I wasn't imagining anything. There were 2 in the pack. Pristine, wrapped, untouched. Not the sort of thing you buy for yourself as a joke, not the kind of thing you absent-mindedly carry. The words, men's protection, flashed like a neon sign between my lashes. I sat down on the kitchen stool and felt a weight drop into my ribs. When she came in from the shower, humming a song she'd hummed for years, I asked, "Where did you get these?" Her smile faltered. She closed her mouth, then put on a casualness she'd practiced for our good years. "Oh, those. Must have been from the clinic. I picked them up for a friend at work." "Your friend who's a man?" My voice betrayed me. Sharp, small. She laughed nervously and said, No, it's okay." Her knee brushed mine, and there was warmth, the same warmth I'd mistaken for honesty a dozen times before. I wanted to believe her. I didn't. Accusation piled on accusation in my head, late evenings at the office, phone calls downstairs, the way she had started leaving lipstick faintly on the collar of a shirt that wasn't mine. Small things had been dressed as nothing. Today, the foil pack was a verdict waiting to be announced. I went to work that day like a man holding a secret that could topple a country. I typed emails with both hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, scrolled through calendar invites I'd never seen her make. I tried logic, reason, the old rationalizations. Maybe she was hiding it because she was embarrassed, maybe she meant to tell me, maybe she'd been protecting someone. But every maybe was a dead end. That night, when she slept with her back to me, I took the pack and slipped it into my pocket. It felt like contraband. Revenge is a temptation that sits on the tongue like something sweet and poisonous. The thought of humiliating her, of giving her a small taste of the chaos she'd been serving me in private, settled in like a slow, malignant fever. A week passed. I watched her. I watched him in the little moments where his face showed up in her phone. The cropped photos, the laughter, an intimacy stitched in pixels that had no idea how loud it really was. I wanted to tear the fabric of whatever they had woven and watch it unravel. The pepper spray was a small thing, cheap and legal and ubiquitous in the aisles of the supermarket, a tiny, sanctioned instrument of fear. I bought one with my heart clanging in my throat, and when the cashier asked if I needed a bag, I shook my head like a man speeding through a dream. I didn't plan anything elaborate. That would have required a level of courage I didn't have. I simply opened the foil pack one afternoon while she was at the market and slipped the pepper spray inside. It fit awkwardly, an unnatural shape among the small rectangles. I resealed the bag as best as I could. The foil crinkled like a whisper. I told myself the plan was symbolic. A prank that would make her shriek and run, a loud enough jolt to wake her from whatever stupor had her seeking another man. I would not hurt anyone. I would not hurt her. I would humiliate. I would expose. I would drag the dishonesty into the light. That night, I left the house before she woke. I imagined the scene in slow motion, her reaching into her bag, the panic, the realization, the shaking apology as the lie collapsed. I rehearsed my lines for when she called me from the supermarket aisle. I would be stoic. I would not play the guilty one. I would show her the mirror she had been hiding behind. The phone rang at 6:07 p.m. Her voice quivered. "Do you have pepper spray in your bag?" she asked. My imagined triumph froze midair. "What? No," I said, my voice thin.
She cried.
Short, sharp breaths between words. It exploded. Someone cut me. My hand. It burned. No, what happened?" I asked, image of smugness burning away. "It's all over, I don't know." Her sentences were small, become shards as she described being in the cab on her way home when someone had knocked the bag from the shelf and another person reached in, and the contents spilled. She cried, then apologized between sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I was not ready for the confusion, for the bile of guilt that came up like bile. The ringing in my ears was not triumph, but an alarm. I pictured the cab driver peering at them. I pictured the flash of orange and the sting. I pictured the raw panic in a stranger's hands. The next hour was a blur of ambulance lights and antiseptic smells. I sat in the emergency room while nurses cleaned and iced her wrists, while the doctor explained that pepper spray could be more than a sting. It could cause debilitating pain and temporary blindness if it made contact with mucous membranes. She had been lucky, he said. Lucky. I repeated in my head like a foreign word. She looked at me from the plastic chair, and I could not meet her eyes. She sniffed and said, "I thought it was a condom. I thought someone had put something in my bag." Her sentence dissolved into a heap of shame. I tried to fix it with apologies. I tried to fix it with explanations that sounded like excuses. I tried to stitch it back together with frantic offers to pay for therapy, for doctor bills, for anything that would make this right. But the truth has a way of unspooling stubbornly. What I had done had been cruel and dangerous. And then the anger shifted. Not the kind that births revenge, but the kind that matters more: shame and fear. Shame for what I had almost done, fear that my reaction to betrayal had become a new kind of betrayal. She looked at me that night in a way she never had before. It was not the look of a woman with a secret. It was the look of a woman who'd been given a gift she hadn't earned, the gift of a terrible illumination. "I didn't want to tell you," she said quietly. I thought I'd ruin everything. I thought you'd think I was a fool." I sat on the edge of the bed, the blanket heavy on my knees. My hands felt like they belonged to someone else. "Who is he?" I asked. She swallowed. The name came out like a confession at an altar. Jonas. Jonas. His name had been a ghost in my life for months. I had seen his laugh in my wife's messages, the casual familiarity in the photos, the small jokes. I had heard him on conference calls when she worked late. She had told me he was a colleague, a friend. He was both. "He's leaving," she said. "He told me to pack light, to come over his place. He said he couldn't risk being seen with me." My hands found the pepper spray on the bedside table. I pushed it away and it skittered across the floor. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice small and brittle. She shook her head. "I was ashamed. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could stop it. I thought I could be the kind of wife who forgives everything." Forgiveness was not what I needed. I needed clarity. I needed boundaries. I needed to know the depth of the fissure that had opened under our feet. "And you," she asked suddenly, voice raw, "you put that in my bag." I didn't deny it. What good would that do? The shame burned across my face like a second wound. "You could have killed someone," she whispered. Not angry. Not yet. Just exhausted. "Do you even see what you almost did?" I saw it then. The cab driver's flinch, a child looking at them from a stroller, the possibility that the spray might have hit someone else's eyes, might have destroyed a night for a stranger who had nothing at all to do with the mess of our marriage. I saw the unspooling harm that comes when hurt is met with harm. Revenge is rarely the clean justice we imagine. It so often tastes like something metallic and hollow. I wanted to annihilate the image of her with him. Instead, I had almost annihilated trust and our safety. The realization made something in me pivot. I needed justice, perhaps, but not the kind which replicates the violence I despised. I wanted consequences for the betrayal that would not produce collateral damage. I wanted her to own the truth. I wanted him to see the damage he had caused. We had a long, fractured talk over the next days. It was not pretty. There were accusations like thrown plates and tears like weather. She told me things I could have never guessed. His manipulations, the way he'd asked her to hide messages, the way he'd joked about the easy life in front of her. She told me about the initial intoxication of being noticed and about the slow ache that followed. The truth, not because I wanted absolution, but because half answers are poison. She listened with an expression that moved from hurt to something more like compassion, which I had no right to expect. "I don't want to leave you," she said in the hollow morning between night and dawn. "I don't know if I deserve you, but I don't want to be with him." The choice, then, stood in stark relief. We could fracture beyond repair, or we could accept that something had broken and try to rebuild.
She chose me to try.
I chose to try to forgive, not in the sudden way the novels promise, but in a deliberate, lumbering, daily way. I called Jonas. I told him in a voice that didn't tremble that I wanted him to stay away. I told him not to reach for her. He laughed, a dismissive sound. He told me he'd do as he pleased. There was no threat in his laugh. Only contempt. It's funny how small the weapon of truth becomes when pointed steadily. I began to record our lives in places I hadn't thought to look. Work emails, the places she spent late nights. Not to entrap her, but to ensure we had evidence should Jonas decide to make things uglier. I told her every step I took. There was nothing sneaky in it. She knew. This was not about fishing for betrayal. It was about building a wall that said, "You either choose this life or you don't." Jonas showed up once. He walked up our porch as if it was his first time meeting an in-law. I met him there, flanked by the grief and the anger, and a very deliberate calm. I told him, plain as daylight, that he belonged nowhere near my family. He smirked and tried to belittle me, and in that moment I reached for a different kind of revenge, the kind that doesn't leave scars. I went public with the truth, but not in the way tabloid fantasies imagine. I wrote a measured letter to his employer, to the manager who used to joke with him about late-night projects with my wife. I sent copies to his mother. I told the simple facts. There had been an inappropriate relationship. It had the potential to affect work projects. If he wanted to behave like a predator in his personal life, he shouldn't expect the people who work with him to be unaware. It wasn't dramatic. It was careful and precise. It didn't explode, it leaked. Not a headline, but a slow realization. He lost a contract. A partner stepped back. The man who'd flung himself into our lives without a backward glance suddenly had to answer to other people. Healing was not linear. It was a functional, day-by-day thing. Therapy sessions, small rituals of apology that needed repetition to be believed, 100 tiny promises she had to show me she could keep.
We joined a group.
She wrote letters to me that were not meant to be read aloud in public, but to be stored in a box. Promises of transparency, small tokens of accountability. 1 year after that ridiculous day in the kitchen, we celebrated the fact that we could sit in the same room without an ache that made the air heavy. We had not erased the past. We had, in small and sometimes clumsy ways, chosen to move forward. I never told the whole story publicly. Some secrets were ours to carry. But the memory of the foil pack, the pepper spray, the ambulance lights, they became part of the catalog of things we learned from. That violence begets violence, that humiliation rarely heals, and that the real fight is for the heart that betrayed you to understand the dignity it trashed. We did not get a tidy redemption. We got days that fit together with elbow grease and stubbornness. We built safeguards, passwords shared, phones left open on kitchen counters, a ritual of a weekly check-in. She learned to bring me into the parts of life she'd once kept secret. I learned to listen without assuming the worst at every quiet moment. I wanted him to feel small. I wanted him to be stripped of his smugness. For a while, the slow consequences I set in motion did that. Jonas felt the coolness of colleagues who no longer trusted him, and that was a kind of small justice. But more than his discomfort, I learned this. Revenge is an easy currency, but it's a counterfeit one. It buys a temporary high, but the debt you incur is measured in the loss of your own humanity. Putting the pepper spray in her bag was my lowest currency, a note of violence signed by my own hand. What I regret is not that I wanted him to pay. I still wanted that, but that I almost surrendered to the very ugliness I hated. What I learned to cherish instead was the steadier, more radical work of repair. Honesty, presence, the rebuilding of trust that is not fast or flashy, but durable. We survived imperfectly. We stayed, tentatively. She found the courage to cut off the man who had been a feast of lies and return, slowly, to being with me. I found the courage to stop wanting to humiliate and start wanting to protect. There are nights when the fear returns, an old text message, a name on a screen. But now, instead of snatching for acts of petty revenge, I breathe and choose to talk.
To show.
To rebuild. If there is revenge in the story, it is the eventual undoing of the thing that caused the pain, Jonas's reliance on secrecy and manipulation. He was stripped, not by a dramatic sting, but by the quiet, bureaucratic unmasking of a man who thought no one would ever care enough to look. I kept the pepper spray where it belonged, in a drawer labeled for safety. Sometimes I take it out when I feel afraid, and I look at it like a relic of a time I almost let rage define me. Then I put it back and close the drawer. Epilogue. The foil pack rests in a small box in the attic now, among old ticket stubs and holiday cards. Sometimes I take it out and feel the weight of that week. Fear, rage, shame, and, finally, the slow labor of rebuilding. We learned boundaries. We learned language. We learned that honesty is a hard, bright thing you have to make space for. We also learned a better kind of revenge, the one that is practiced not in public humiliation but in the quiet reclaiming of life, holding tight to what was true and refusing to let the actions of another person define our days. When I tell this story, I tell it without pride for what I did at my worst. I tell it with gratitude for the fact that we found our way back from it. Sometimes the only justice we can craft is the one that keeps our own hands clean from the violence we once considered. That, in the end, is the revenge that lasts.